Have you ever noticed how, as the years pass, you find yourself saying no more often to social invitations and wondered if something was wrong with you? You're not alone, and there's nothing wrong with you at all. Picture this. It's Sunday afternoon, and your phone rings with yet another invitation to a family gathering where the same old arguments will unfold, or a neighbor asking you to join another coffee meeting filled with gossip and complaints. You feel that familiar heaviness in your chest, that quiet voice saying, "I just don't want to go," and then the guilt creeps in. Society tells us that staying home means we're becoming bitter, isolated, or giving up on life. But what if I told you that the opposite is true? What if choosing solitude over empty socializing is actually one of the wisest decisions you can make after 70? In the next few minutes, I'm going to share 6 profound reasons why stepping back from certain social obligations isn't about becoming antisocial. It's about finally becoming wise enough to protect what matters most. You'll discover why your shrinking social circle might be the healthiest thing that's ever happened to you, and how saying no to others is really saying yes to yourself. Number 1. Emotional boundaries. There's a moment when you realize that some conversations don't just tire your body, they drain your very soul. Maybe it happened to you last week, sitting across from someone who complained for an hour straight, never once asking how you were feeling. You left that encounter feeling hollow, wondering why what used to feel normal now feels like carrying stones in your chest. This is the reality millions of people over 60 face every day. We've been raised to be polite, to listen, to show up no matter how we feel. But somewhere along the way, we started noticing that certain people treat us like emotional dumping grounds. They call when they need to vent, visit when they want free advice, and disappear when we might need a listening ear ourselves. The weight of these one-sided relationships becomes heavier as we age, not because we're getting weaker, but because we're finally getting wiser. What's happening is that your emotional immune system is waking up after decades of being ignored. Just like your body learned to reject harmful foods as you aged, your heart is learning to recognize relationships that poison your peace. These aren't always dramatic, toxic people. Sometimes they're family members who turn every gathering into a battlefield of old grudges. Sometimes they're neighbors who can only talk about their ailments and complaints. Sometimes they're friends who never remember what you shared with them last time because they're too busy waiting for their turn to speak again. Take Rajesh, a 62-year-old man who spent years dreading visits to his brother's house. Every single time, without fail, the evening would dissolve into heated arguments about politics or bitter rehashing of childhood grievances. Rajesh would drive home with his jaw clenched, his sleep disrupted, carrying that familiar knot of frustration that would last for days. The turning point came when he realized something profound. He didn't owe anyone his peace of mind, not even family. When Rajesh stopped attending those gatherings, something beautiful happened. The guilt he expected never came. Instead, he felt lighter, clearer, more like himself. His brother was initially offended, but Rajesh had learned that other people's reactions to his boundaries were not his responsibility. He had spent decades putting everyone else's comfort before his own emotional well-being, and at 62, he decided that was enough. This isn't about becoming bitter or shutting out the world. It's about recognizing that your emotional energy is sacred and finite. You've earned the right to protect it. When you choose not to engage in conversations that drain you, you're not being selfish, you're being wise. You're making space for interactions that actually nourish you, that leave you feeling grateful you spent that time together, instead of counting the minutes until you could escape. Setting emotional boundaries after 70 isn't withdrawal. It's finally learning the difference between loneliness and solitude, between being needed and being valued. And once you taste that freedom, you'll wonder why you waited so long to claim it. Number 2. Time revaluation. When did you first notice that an hour spent in meaningless chatter felt like an eternity, while an hour reading a good book disappeared like a whisper? This shift doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in slowly, this new relationship with time that changes everything about how you choose to spend your days. In your younger years, time felt endless. You could waste entire afternoons on obligations that brought you nothing, attend gatherings out of habit, sit through conversations that added nothing to your life. There was always tomorrow, always next week, always more time to make up for what felt lost. But somewhere after 70, a quiet revolution happens in your heart. Each morning becomes more precious. Each sunset carries more weight. You begin to understand, not just intellectually but in your bones, that time is the one thing you cannot earn back once it's spent. This awakening transforms how you view social commitments. That weekly bridge game that feels more like a chore than pleasure, the monthly family dinner where everyone stares at their phones, the coffee date with someone who only talks about their medical problems. Suddenly, these obligations don't feel obligatory anymore. They feel like choices. And with that realization comes power, the power to choose differently. Consider Sudha, a 77-year-old woman who used to spend every Sunday visiting a cousin across town. For years, she made this journey out of duty, sitting through the same repetitive conversations, feeling more drained than fulfilled. The cousin rarely asked about Sudha's life, rarely showed interest in her thoughts or feelings. It was a one-way street disguised as a relationship. One Sunday, instead of making that familiar drive, Sudha took her sketchbook to the lake near her home. She spent those same 3 hours drawing the way light danced on water, listening to birds she'd never noticed before, feeling a peace that had been missing from her Sundays for years. That evening, she didn't feel the usual post-visit emptiness. She felt alive, creative, connected to something deeper than social obligation. The shift in how we value time after 70 isn't about becoming antisocial, it's about becoming intentional. When you realize that you have fewer years ahead than behind, every moment gains weight. You stop spending time like a spendthrift and start investing it like a wise economist. A quiet morning with your coffee and thoughts becomes more valuable than a noisy brunch with acquaintances who barely remember your name. This doesn't mean you avoid all social contact. It means you choose social contact that feeds your soul rather than depletes it. You start saying yes to conversations that make you think, laugh, or feel understood. You start saying no to gatherings that leave you feeling like you've been emptied out and refilled with nothing worthwhile. The guilt that once accompanied saying no begins to fade when you understand this truth. Your time is not a renewable resource. Every hour you give to something that doesn't serve you is an hour stolen from something that could. And at this stage of life, you've earned the wisdom to know the difference. When people ask why you're not as social as you used to be, you can simply say that you've learned to value quality over quantity, not just in relationships, but in moments. You've discovered that the art of living well isn't about filling every moment with activity, it's about filling the right moments with meaning. Number 3, emotional drain. Have you ever left a social gathering feeling more alone than when you arrived? You spent hours surrounded by people, participated in conversations, even laughed a few times, but something was missing. Something essential. You realize now that it wasn't connection you experienced, it was performance. And performances, no matter how well executed, leave you empty when the curtain falls. This is one of the most painful discoveries of aging, understanding the difference between being around people and truly being with people. For decades, many of us confused the two. We attended gatherings where conversations skimmed the surface like stones on water, never diving deep enough to touch anything real. We smiled and nodded while others talked at us, not to us. We left feeling depleted, carrying a hollow ache we couldn't quite name. What you're experiencing isn't unusual or selfish. It's your soul's way of telling you that superficial interactions are no longer enough. Scientists call it socio-emotional selectivity theory, but you don't need fancy terms to understand what's happening. As the years pass, your heart develops better filters. It stops accepting empty calories in relationships, the same way your body learned to reject foods that don't nourish it. The emotional drain comes from encounters where you give your attention, your presence, your genuine interest, and receive nothing meaningful in return. It's listening to someone complain for an hour without them asking how you're doing. It's sharing something important only to watch their eyes glaze over as they wait to redirect the conversation back to themselves. It's being treated like a convenient audience rather than a valued participant in the conversation. Take Harihar Prasad, a 74-year-old retired teacher who used to attend every family gathering despite feeling invisible at them. His adult children and their spouses would talk around him, not to him. They'd discuss their jobs, their problems, their plans, while he sat quietly in his chair, occasionally asked to pass the salt or refill someone's glass. He was present in body but absent from their hearts and minds. The breaking point came during a holiday dinner, when his grandson asked everyone what they were grateful for. Person after person shared their thoughts, and when it came to Harihar, his daughter actually gestured for him to hurry up because dessert was waiting. In that moment, he understood that he had become a piece of furniture in his own family's eyes, expected to be there but not expected to contribute anything meaningful. That was the last family gathering Harihar attended out of obligation. Instead, he started spending those Sunday afternoons in his garden, tending to plants that responded to his care. He began taking walks with his neighbor Samuel, a man who actually listened when he spoke, who asked follow-up questions, who remembered details from their previous conversations. For the first time in years, Harihar felt seen, heard, valued. The beautiful truth about emotional drain is that once you recognize it, you can stop it. You can choose to invest your emotional energy in relationships that give back, that make you feel more like yourself instead of less. You can stop accepting crumbs of attention and start requiring the full meal of genuine connection. This doesn't mean you need deep philosophical conversations every time you interact with someone. It simply means the other person should acknowledge your presence, show interest in your thoughts, treat you as a complete person rather than a convenience. It means choosing people who add to your life rather than subtract from it. The shift from quantity to quality in relationships isn't about becoming difficult or demanding. It's about finally respecting yourself enough to require that others respect you too. And when you make this shift, something magical happens. You discover that meaningful connections were waiting for you all along, hidden beneath the pile of empty interactions you thought you had to tolerate. Number 4. Physical energy. The phone rings, and your friend wants to meet for lunch across town. Your first thought isn't about the joy of seeing them. It's about the drive, the parking, the walking, the uncomfortable restaurant chairs, and how exhausted you'll feel afterward. When did social invitations start requiring cost-benefit analysis? When did your body start sending you invoices for activities that used to feel effortless? This is the reality that nobody talks about openly. After 70, every outing has a physical price tag. What used to be simple decisions now require strategic planning. Will there be stairs to climb? Is the parking far from the entrance? Are the chairs comfortable enough for your back? Will the noise level trigger your headaches? These aren't petty concerns. They're practical wisdom learned from experience. Your body has become both teacher and accountant, keeping careful records of what each activity costs and how long it takes to recover. A 2-hour coffee date might require a full day of recovery. A family gathering could leave you drained for a weekend. This isn't weakness or aging poorly. This is your body's way of helping you make better choices about how to spend your limited energy reserves. The hardest part isn't the physical limitations themselves. It's the guilt that comes with honoring them. Society tells us that staying active means saying yes to everything, that declining invitations means giving up. But there's profound wisdom in what your body is teaching you. It's not telling you to stop living, it's telling you to live more intentionally. Consider Savitri, a 78-year-old woman who spent years pushing through physical discomfort to maintain her social commitments. Every Friday, she met 3 friends for coffee at a cafe downtown. The trip required 40 minutes of driving in traffic, hunting for parking, walking 2 blocks, and sitting on hard wooden chairs for 2 hours. By the time she got home, her back ached, her feet were swollen, and she needed the rest of the day to recover. But Savitri kept going because she thought that's what staying socially connected meant. She thought that admitting the physical toll was admitting defeat. One Friday, After a particularly difficult week battling arthritis pain, she decided to skip the coffee date. Instead of the expected loneliness, she felt relief. Instead of guilt, she felt gratitude toward her body for finally making her listen. When her friends called to check on her, Savitri made a suggestion that changed everything. Instead of meeting at the noisy cafe with impossible parking, why not rotate hosting at each other's homes? Suddenly, these coffee dates became more intimate, more comfortable, more nourishing. No fighting traffic, no uncomfortable chairs, no rushing, just connection in its purest form. The shift in how you relate to physical energy after 70 isn't about limitation, it's about optimization. Your body has gathered decades of data about what serves you and what depletes you. It knows that certain activities will cost you more than they give back. Learning to listen to this wisdom isn't giving in to age, it's partnering with experience. This means choosing the restaurant with comfortable seating over the trendy spot with hard benches. It means meeting friends for tea at 2 p.m. instead of dinner at 8 p.m. when your energy naturally dips. It means declining events that require more physical output than they provide emotional input. These aren't compromises, they're intelligent choices. Your energy is precious now, in ways it never was before. Each day comes with a certain amount in the bank, and you get to decide how to spend it. You can blow it all on one exhausting obligation, or you can invest it wisely in activities and people that give back more than they take. The most liberating realization is that protecting your physical energy isn't selfish, it's responsible. When you honor your body's needs, you show up more fully for the activities and people you do choose. You're not less social, you're more intentionally social. You're not giving up on life, you're finally learning how to live it on your own terms. Number 5. Emotional economy. If someone kept borrowing money from you but never paid it back, never even said thank you, and only called when they needed more, you'd stop lending to them eventually. So why do we keep lending our emotional energy to people who take everything and give nothing in return? Why do we keep investing our hearts in relationships that pay no dividends of care, respect, or genuine affection? At some point after 70, many of us experience what I call an emotional awakening. We begin to understand that our emotional energy operates just like money in the bank. Every interaction is either a deposit or a withdrawal. Every relationship either builds us up or tears us down. And just like with finances, we start paying attention to which accounts are draining us dry. This realization can be shocking at first. You might discover that the person who calls you most often is also the person who makes you feel worst about yourself. You might notice that certain family members only reach out when they need something, treating you like an emotional ATM. You might realize that you've been giving and giving and giving to people who wouldn't cross the street to comfort you in your time of need. The difference is that now you're finally wise enough to do something about it. Your tolerance for emotional vampires has reached its limit. You no longer have the luxury of pretending that one-sided relationships are better than no relationship at all. You've learned that protecting your emotional energy isn't selfish, it's survival. Take Walter, a 62-year-old man who spent years calling his adult son every week, hoping for a real conversation. Week after week, his son would cut him short, sound distracted, or turn every topic back to his own problems. When Walter tried to share something meaningful, his son would respond with impatience or dismissal. When Walter faced his own health scare, his son barely acknowledged it before launching into complaints about his job. The final straw came when Walter called to share the news that he'd been selected to display his woodworking at a local craft fair, something he'd dreamed about for years. His son's response was a distracted, "That's nice, Dad," followed immediately by a 10-minute complaint about his boss. Walter hung up that day, understanding something profound. He had been emotionally starving himself by feeding someone who would never feed him back. Walter didn't cut his son out of his life entirely, but he stopped initiating those weekly calls. Instead, he started spending that emotional energy on his neighbor who shared his passion for crossword puzzles and classical music. Their conversations left him feeling energized rather than depleted. He felt heard, valued, appreciated. His emotional bank account finally started growing instead of shrinking. This shift toward emotional economy isn't about becoming calculating or cold. It's about finally recognizing your own worth and insisting that others recognize it too. It's about understanding that your emotional energy is finite and precious, especially now when it takes longer to recharge and comes with no guarantee of tomorrow's supply. You stop tolerating the friend who only calls to complain and never asks how you're doing. You stop catering to the family member who criticizes everything you do. You stop being available to people who are never available for you. This isn't punishment, it's protection. This isn't giving up on relationships, it's finally insisting on real ones. The beautiful discovery in practicing emotional economy is that it creates space for relationships that actually nourish you. When you stop wasting your emotional energy on people who don't value it, you have more to invest in people who do. Your conversations become richer, your connections deeper, your heart fuller. Some people will be offended when you start applying these emotional boundaries. They'll accuse you of being difficult, selfish, or changing. What they really mean is that you're no longer allowing them to take advantage of your kindness. And that's exactly the point. You've earned the right to be choosy about who gets access to your heart, your time, and your emotional energy. The best part about emotional economy is the return on investment. When you put your emotional energy into people who appreciate it, who reciprocate it, who value it, you get back more than you put in. You discover that there are people out there who will celebrate your craft fair triumph, who will sit with you during your health scares, who will remember what matters to you and ask about it later. These are the relationships worth your investment. Number 6. Self-respect awakening. There comes a moment, usually quiet and unannounced, when you stop asking permission to matter. Maybe it happens when someone interrupts you for the 5th time in one conversation. Maybe it's when you realize you've spent another evening listening to someone else's problems without being asked about your own. Or maybe it's simply when you look in the mirror and decide that the person looking back deserves better than you've been giving yourself. This awakening of self-respect doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives with clarity. After decades of putting everyone else's comfort before your own, of smoothing over every rough edge to keep the peace, of saying yes when everything inside you was screaming no, something shifts. You stop measuring your worth by how much others need you and start measuring it by how much you respect yourself. For many people over 70, this awakening feels revolutionary. You've spent most of your life being the accommodating one, the helpful one, the one who could always be counted on to sacrifice your own plans if someone else needed something. You were taught that this was virtue, that putting others first was the mark of a good person. But somewhere along the way, putting others first became putting yourself last, and putting yourself last became putting yourself nowhere at all. The awakening often begins with small moments of recognition. You notice that you've become the family's default solution to every problem, but nobody considers whether solving everyone else's problems is a problem for you. You realize that you've been saying yes to invitations that make you miserable because you were afraid of disappointing people who rarely worry about disappointing you. You understand that you've been so busy being what everyone else needed that you forgot to be what you needed. Consider Marilyn, a 76-year-old grandmother who spent years being the family's emotional headquarters. Every holiday was planned around her house. Every family crisis was brought to her doorstep. Every grandchild's need became her responsibility. She loved her family, but she was drowning in their expectations. Her own needs, her own desires, her own peace of mind had been buried under layers of other people's demands. The awakening came on a Sunday morning when her daughter called, expecting Marilyn to babysit so she could go shopping. Marilyn had been looking forward to a quiet morning with her tea and her book, maybe some gentle gardening. For years, she would have automatically said yes, packed up her plans, and headed over to watch the grandchildren. But that Sunday, something was different. Instead of her usual automatic yes, Marilyn heard herself saying, "I'm not available today." The silence on the other end of the phone was telling. Her daughter wasn't used to hearing no from her mother. She tried guilt, then manipulation, then frustration. but Marilyn held her ground. She spent that Sunday morning exactly as she had planned, and for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged to herself. This self-respect awakening doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop caring about others more than you care about yourself. It means you stop being so available that you become invisible, so helpful that you become taken for granted, so accommodating that you accommodate yourself right out of your own life. The awakening teaches you that saying no is not selfish, it's necessary. That disappointing others occasionally is healthier than disappointing yourself constantly. That being liked is less important than being respected, and being respected starts with respecting yourself. You learn that peace of mind isn't something you find, it's something you protect. Some people won't like this new version of you. They'll miss the old you who said yes to everything, who absorbed all their problems, who made their lives easier by making your own life harder. They might call you stubborn, difficult, or selfish. What they really mean is that you're no longer as easy to take advantage of, and that's exactly the point. The most beautiful part of this self-respect awakening is how it transforms your relationships. The people who truly love you will adjust and respect your boundaries. They'll learn to appreciate you more because you're no longer endlessly available. The people who can't accept your boundaries will distance themselves, and you'll discover that their absence improves your life more than their presence ever did. At this stage of your life, you've earned the right to be selective about how you spend your energy, your time, and your emotional resources. You've earned the right to say no without explanation, to choose peace over popularity, to prioritize your own well-being without guilt. This isn't selfishness, it's self-preservation. This isn't giving up on relationships. It's finally insisting on relationships that give back. Your self-respect awakening is really a coming home to yourself, a reunion with the person you always were underneath all the expectations and obligations. And once you experience that homecoming, you'll never want to live anywhere else again. What we've shared today isn't a story about giving up or becoming antisocial. It's a story about finally growing into who you were always meant to be. After 7 decades of life, you've earned something precious: the wisdom to know the difference between connection and obligation, between solitude and loneliness, between being needed and being valued. Every boundary you set, every invitation you decline, every relationship you step back from that drains rather than nourishes you, these aren't signs of bitterness. They're signs of clarity. You're not closing your heart to the world. You're opening it to what truly matters. Think about Rajesh choosing peace over family drama, Sudha trading empty visits for creative mornings by the lake, Harihar finding genuine connection in his garden and meaningful walks. Each of these choices represents something beautiful: the courage to honor yourself after years of honoring everyone else first. Your social circle might be smaller now, but it's richer. Your calendar might be quieter, but your heart is fuller. You've learned that saying no to what depletes you creates space to say yes to what feeds your soul. This isn't isolation, it's intention. This isn't withdrawal, it's wisdom. The guilt you might feel about these changes? Let it go. You've spent decades being who others needed you to be. Now it's time to be who you need yourself to be. You've earned the right to protect your energy, to choose your company carefully, to prioritize your peace of mind. Which of these 6 reasons spoke most directly to your heart today? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this message resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that choosing themselves isn't selfish, it's sacred. Remember, aging isn't about losing yourself. It's about finally finding yourself. And that journey of self-discovery never ends.